Scott Jennings, I mean, if people don't want to watch the next two debates, do they want the next 4 years to be like what we just saw tonight?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot, Anderson, about this New York Times poll that came out over the weekend. It actually had Donald Trump at 46% job approval, which is pretty good for him, but only 41% on the ballot against Joe Biden. And I've been thinking about, why would you have a gap like that? Usually presidential approval translates into your vote share, but he's obviously losing some people who say, I like his policies, but are something else, exhausted. And I'm thinking about, if those people were watching this debate tonight, how do they feel? And I also think about debates like this, Anderson, through the lens of audience. And the main thing keeping an anvil on Trump's head in terms of job approval all this 4 years has been women. He does fine among men, but women have never given him high marks. And I cannot imagine he did anything tonight that any female viewer who was thinking about supporting him would have appreciated. So if you're looking at it from a raw perspective of what do I have to do to add back to my coalition to get back to where I need to be to win the election, I didn't find it tonight.
You know, Scott, what do you think?
I'll answer that, Anderson, because I think Kirsten on the strategy question had a good one. I do think that the strategy was to hit Biden and try to get under his skin and try to rattle him so that he would start digging holes, rhetorical holes that he couldn't climb out of. The problem is he went from being on offense to just being offensive. He never let the strategy breathe. If you're going to hit somebody and then rattle them, you've got to let that rattling take effect. And Trump just kept interrupting and kept badgering him all night long. So Biden never really had a chance to dig those deep holes. He did make, I think, a few misstatements on some of his agenda items, but that's not what we're going to remember from this debate. So I think the strategy was there, but it was overplayed.
And Andrew, Scott, as a Republican, it's not just he didn't repudiate white supremacists. He told them to stand by. Like, oh, don't do anything now, but stand by because I might need you. I mean, I stand by because if things don't go my way, I'd love you to not stand by any longer and come to a town near you. I mean, what is that? Can you believe that a president of the United States would say that?
Well, I'm just going to say he's going to have to speak for himself on this, because he has to clean this up. He has to clear it up. It's the wrong answer. It's always been the wrong answer. There is a clear right answer to these questions, which is anyone who is committing violence, left, right, white, black, up, down. If you're in a city and you're committing violence and you're doing it in the name of white supremacy or Antifa or anything else, you're all the same. You're hurting America. So go home and stop it. It's always been the right answer, and it's always been that clear. And the fact that he can't look into the camera and say it is a problem. And so I hope that they come out later tonight or tomorrow, whatever, and clean it up, because everybody who's committing violence deserves condemnation. White supremacists and everyone else in these cities that's doing it, they all deserve it. He knows it, and he needs to clean it up.
Yeah, Scott?
You know, Anderson, one issue on this, I think Trump's resistance to this often comes in his innate resistance to being scripted by a media person. So in this case, Wallace was trying to get him to repeat after me. And as we know, Trump has this internal resistance to allowing anybody in the press to make him say anything. But even if that's your attitude, it cannot trump your better moral judgment about these issues. It's politically wrong, but it's just wrong. Quitting a campaign in October. I mean, the reality is, I'm sure the strategy was for Donald Trump to go and try to rattle Joe Biden, to try to get on offense, to try to really rev him up and get him to lose his temper. He has lost his temper in debates that you were in. He screamed at Elizabeth Warren. He challenged a guy in Iowa to a push-up contest. So that was clearly something they had thought about. But the problem is, there's a moment where you have to let it breathe, and you have to get the person where you want them and then let them dig, and then you come back and bury the hole. I mean, it's a classic sort of debating strategy. But if you keep talking over them and you go and you just keep on, then it all becomes about you. And that's another thing about the framing of this race. Donald Trump needs a choice between his ability to recover the economy and Joe Biden's failed record and ideas. Biden needs a referendum on Trump, and Trump's strategy, overplaying, kept him at the center of the race tonight, which means it's still all about him. And if you believe the polling, that's not a winning hand.
So, Scott, what would Donald Trump do, or what should he do in a second debate?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, you go out, look, at some point, he has to say, here's what I'm going to do in a second term. Here's Joe Biden. He's captive to the radical left. Here's what they want to do. And in America, you may not love it all, but you know my policies are going to get us back to normal faster than his. That's the simple framing of the race. And everything about the economy and regular life and whatever, it all has to be put in that box. And every day they don't put this race in that box is a lost day. And by the way, people are voting right now. They don't have unlimited time to make that case. So I guess that's what I would do in the next debate.
What did you see, Scott?
I actually want to disagree a little bit with John's point about chaos. I actually don't think it plays into Trump's hands. There's not that much time left before the election, and Trump needs to change the trajectory. It's been a pretty stable race in the polling. And so if you look at it through the lens of audiences, what kind of audiences does he need to recollect? Does he need to recapture that he had in 16 that he doesn't have now? There's a lot of suburban women. There's some senior citizens that seem to have gravitated away. If you were in those audiences, I'm not sure watching the chaos, if that's the word we want to use, would have done anything to recapture those people. So while I think Trump's hardest core supporters love the smash mouth, and I think Biden's supporters, of course, feel aggrieved that, and they, this validates all their views about Trump. It's those niche audiences that Trump would have to recapture, and I didn't, he was on offense, but he crossed the line and became offensive. And those audiences, I don't think, are going to respond to that kind of, that kind of overplaying your hand.
And look, Biden did not have a great night. He had a good night. The best thing about his performance was Donald Trump going so overboard that he clearly was the only adult in the room.
Angela, in case people are just waking up.
If I may
oh, yeah, quickly, Scott.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to, I think John has a good point. Biden, he had an okay night. There were actually a couple of moments where Trump had Biden on an issue. For instance, on the Green New Deal, I thought Biden was all over the place. And so that was a moment where Trump actually could have scored if not for overplaying and over-talking it. And so you could see a nugget of strategy in there and what Trump was trying to do on some of these issues. But then by overplaying it, he sort of ruined the hole that he was trying to dig for Biden. So it was, to John's point, that they never allowed Biden to dig the hole that they wanted to dig because Trump just, he just couldn't let it breathe. He couldn't let the strategy breathe.
That's interesting. Scott, your takeaway.
Well, look, I think there's a difference between being on offense, which is what Trump probably wanted to do, and being offensive, which is what he wound up doing. He actually tied Biden up, as David said, on a couple of issues. The court packing, Biden didn't have an answer for. Tied him up on the Green New Deal. Biden said he was against it, then he said it would pay for itself, then he said he was against it, but it's on his website. So he actually had a couple of moments where he tied Biden up, but he never stopped talking long enough to let it sink in. And so I think that was a stepping on his own strategy in that case. I look at this through the lens of audiences. Who does Donald Trump need to win the election? He needs to recover some women who are really, that's the gap in his job approval. He does okay among men. Women don't like Donald Trump. They haven't. The gap is getting wider, and he did nothing last night to correct that. I don't think he helped himself with seniors on coronavirus. He didn't look into the camera and say, I know you're vulnerable. I have your back. I thought that was a priority. And he did not lay out a second-term agenda, which continues to be a failing of this campaign. A lot of incumbent presidents forget to do that in the first debate, but he's been forgetting to do it for several months. And at some point, you can't just say, let's fight about the last 4 years. I got to tell you where I'm going to take this country. And we didn't see that either. So all the way around, I just think, let's just say you were a Trump supporter today and you wanted to say they fought to a draw. Well, that doesn't help you because you're already behind. So it's another lost day.
Yeah, I think that.
Using the tactic of bullying in a debate. People, and I go back to 2016, he was aggressive. Trump was aggressive with Hillary Clinton. And he bullied her in some of that debate, but people didn't like Hillary Clinton. Her image was always upside down. And so I've always thought maybe the American people that are watching, oh, I like it. He's giving Hillary Clinton a little bit of a, rough treatment, and that's okay because I don't like her. But they don't feel the same way about Joe Biden, and they certainly don't feel the same way about him when he's talking about his children. And so when you're bullying someone they actually like, the tactic doesn't work. In fact, it backfires on you. And so Trump was far more aggressive last night than he was in 2016, but the target of being a bully matters. And in this particular case, Biden just simply isn't as disliked as his opponent was before. Therefore, it renders this as less effective.
Scott, did you think President Trump came off looking strong after that or not?
No, I didn't. And we talked yesterday and predicted that he would be aggressive with Biden in an attempt to get him to crack under the pressure and maybe make some misstatements. The trouble is he went from being on offense to being offensive. and he never let the strategy breathe. He never gave Joe Biden that chance to be rattled, because Donald Trump never stopped talking for the entirety of the debate. So no, I didn't think he looked particularly strong. And I look at this through the lens of audiences. You know, who does Donald Trump have to recapture from the 2016 coalition to win in 2020? And I think about women who are crushing him in the polling right now, and I think about senior citizens who don't seem to be as hot on him this time around. And I'm not sure either of those audiences picked up in a positive way on anything the president did last night.
I want to play a moment. There were lots of them last night, but I want to focus in on this exchange. Moderator Chris Wallace asked President Trump if he would condemn white supremacist groups. Let's listen to this.
Who would you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem.
So, Scott, he said, stand back, stand by. That's not a condemnation. In fact, the far-right group then pledged allegiance to the president after those comments. Why is he incapable of condemning racist groups?
Yeah, really, really bad moment. There's only one answer to that question, and that is, I condemn them. I condemn anyone in our cities who's causing violence, and nobody comes in my name and causes violence and should expect me to support that. There's only one answer. You're the commander-in-chief, and if you want to look strong on public safety and law and order, as he calls it, you have to condemn all of these groups, no matter what form they come in. He failed it. He missed that question last night, and it's going to be the most talked about issue coming out of the debate because he whiffed it.
Scott, what do you make of the president's continued attempts to undermine the integrity of the election? He did it again last night, refusing to say that he would accept the outcome of the election. He urged his supporters to go to the polls to, quote, watch very carefully what happens. I mean, does that endear him to independents or people he needs to win?
Well, he continues to conflate various issues. I mean, look, there have been some reported issues with the mail ballots in some places. Pennsylvania is a good example where some folks are actually having trouble figuring out how to turn them in. And so these are real issues. And so that's one set of things.
It's nothing out of the ordinary. This isn't a widespread
problem. It is
problem.
for Pennsylvania, which has no demonstrable history of voting by mail. And my fear for a state like that is several people who think they voted are not going to have their votes counted. And I don't think that's right for people who think they voted to not be counted. But the point is, he's conflating those kinds of issues with voter fraud. And when you conflate all of it, I think it confuses the situation, and it does reduce confidence in the overall election. And he's been doing this for several weeks. And no, I think his attacks on the system may be causing some of his own supporters to question their own ballots and to question their own methods for voting. And I'm not sure that's going to help him get the votes he needs.
Are either of you optimistic about the remaining debates in terms of helping voters make a choice? Scott, I'll let you go first. Karen, I'll let you first.
Look, I think the town hall format is drastically different than a moderated format, so that could change the tone of this. But unless he lays out a second-term agenda, I mean the president, in either of these next two debates, I don't suspect they'll change the trajectory.
Karen, real quick.